a few days ago or like weeks ago, somebody can misunderstand me very quickly is because it's not being a Debbie Downer. I've already explained that if people like time elapse, your elite is a clock, literally. If you're overspending time on the first yellow elite, it ruins your vibe immediately. It's like a vibe check, right? In the modern or, you know, whatever generational words we can think of, it's like a vibe check. Your the vibe of the first yellow elite or two is so bad, or in the current situation that you're in, when you start losing time, isn't that like an indicator, right? And so the person, that didn't like what I say, right? The one that clearly didn't, you know, the one that clearly didn't, they didn't really understand the vibe check thing. All their understanding, obviously, is the negativity. But I'm not, like, that's very superficial, you know? Like, it's very superficial. It's like the surface. Like, if the person thinks that I'm saying things as a Debbie Downer, that's way, way superficial. It's like people who use the word thick skin, right? It's like you're not thick skinned enough. Now, on the other hand, you can say that, why am I talking about this when I'm talking about thick skin? So I don't have a thick skin because I seem to have a problem with it. But it's not about that though. The problem is that that person, right, is only scratching the surface. Now, he's scratching the surface of the conversation. I'm not talking about the build, okay? The person knows the builds. I'm not talking about the builds, okay? There are two people there in that conversation, right? I'm talking about the other one, right? Or both of them either. Is that I'm not talking about the build. The conversation, they're only scratching the surface of the conversation. That's the problem that I'm having. And that's the problem that is with the time elapsed thing. Is that they are scratched because they're thinking only in the surface level of the conversation. It's nothing to do with the builds. They know how to play. They know the game. They've been playing for ages. It has nothing to do with that. And so the misunderstanding comes in is when they take things to a level that is like the high level stuff, right? People talk about high level like explanation, and they take the high level explanation only. They're not going down to the the root of the problem. So the whole clock, right, concept is where I was getting at on the yellow elite. And then the person's like, oh, you know, being negative, being negative, being negative. It, but so on the topic of negative though, now there's another problem. Okay, I've played it consistently, and so have you, right? And so, but there's a but to it. Earlier, I talked about my Paragon number. I'm usually lower in Paragon number, so I'm obviously needing more time than the other person, right? Or needing more time than you per the clock concept. So then, how come I can clear on the weaker seasons? For example, like last season. Last season, I got the GR138 when the God DH wasn't it. And I'm at the same paragon that we're talking about, like for the person playing. This is like two different people that we're talking about. But like for the person that we're helping, the person is at the paragon that I was last season. But last season, the seasonal theme isn't helpful for the God build. But yet I did the 138. So in the clock thing, per Yellow Elite, if you start thinking about it, the conversation level that that person, the other person that's misunderstanding me, right? They're not seeing the clock issue. They're only reading what I'm saying, right? And of course, the conversation was about cooldown reduction, right? So, now, about the cooldown reduction problem. Well, I mentioned that there is a weaker season and a stronger season. That was the phrasing, right? If you depend on the seasonal theme, your cooldown reduction hardly matters, right? That's one factor. The other factor is that I said the window of opportunity. So if you're lacking cooldown reduction, your window of opportunity from the range monster, that's the third criteria, right? So now we have another problem. The person even doesn't even like break down into three factors. Like they may have done that like mindlessly. They might have done that. So we're not talking about like English level like comprehension or something. We're not talking about that. We're talking about the person isn't actually listening. They know all this stuff, but they're not actually listening to the three parts, right? And that's what creates the misunderstanding is that now all they think about is the negativity. But I'm not talking about the literal words that I'm saying. I'm talking about the criteria, the factors that I'm talking about. Like when you have a lack of cooldown, right? And you're pushing higher than you're normally doing, right? The window of opportunity from the range monster, so meaning that certain range monsters are so strong that you would think by the amount of time that you've played, right? We're talking about the two different people. One person has played a lot, and the other person is, reasonably enough, right? Now we're talking about certain range monsters are so good at sniping you in the window of opportunity that I actually literally used. They're not understanding what window opportunity means. They like they almost like they heard it, they read it, but they didn't like actually absorb it. So there's three levels, right? They read it, they heard it, but they didn't absorb it. They didn't like absorb what window opportunity is. They know what it means. They know what it means, but they didn't absorb it. So and then without absorbing it, now it's being negative because you're missing the parts of the problem. It's not just like, oh, TLDR, Da 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 da. It's not that. Because if you want the TLDR, you're always going to prefer speed GRs. That's the TLDR because time is money. Time is being efficient. But when you're pushing, the monsters each have a clock, right? So if the range monster reads you like a clock, so you're the clock now. Now you're the elite, right? From the monster's perspective, when I said range monsters, right? The range monster turns you into a monster. You're now the monster, right? You're now the monster for them to hit. So if they see the clock of your cooldown, right? If they see the clock of your cooldown, okay, I have to move a bit in the game, but if they see the clock of your cooldown, that 1.5-second window, what does that mean? Didn't I just solve the misunderstanding? I think people are just like, they're like purposefully doing something to create that negativity. They're not absorbing. They're reading, they're listening, but they're not absorbing. And, you know, parents have that saying. Parents have a saying. And that saying is very true, by the way. They always say, one ear in, one ear out. So you read it, or in this case, you heard it, but you're not actually listening, right? So the misunderstanding is that that person is not absorbing. It's like window of opportunity. Nah, what are you talking about? 1.5 seconds. What are you talking about? All they knew to absorb was the 31 to 36, and that's it. They never read anything else. They never absorb anything else. They're like, oh, it's just the front part, you know, it's just the front part. The middle part is there's one middle part, and I don't know how to reach the end part if they only notice the front part. But anyway, it's like, or they notice the end part and they don't notice the middle part, and then the front part is like, it's just like the front part is like the filler stuff, right? So your front is a filler, and then you saw the end stuff, but then you didn't see the, I don't know. I really don't know. It's like people look at the game like a clock, and yet they don't know how to understand themselves in the way that they reference things to the time that they want. So I'm utterly confused. Like, you know, like I'm super, super confused by like how superficial, you know, that whole thing is. It's like you can play it, but the problem is when the opportunity arises, the monster is going to treat you as a monster, right? From their point of view in that window. Oh, I'm negative. Wow. So from the monster point of view, right? From the point monsters want to kill you. Oh, they found the right time. Oh, what does that mean? Well, if the monsters found the right time and you happen to have cheat dash procced, well, well, what's the conclusion there? I mean, the game says for itself when you have a cheat dash proc, right? So the opportunity of what the cheat dash proc says is that opportunity. So when your cooldown reduction for the God DH, which isn't actually just for the God DH, it's the skill itself. You know, every build that has a certain like cooldown oriented, you know, skill involved is usually pretty big on the cooldown, right? And so you want to work that as a baseline. It's kind of like your Paragon number that you like. If you like 2.5k Paragon every season, you'll work the 2.5k Paragon, right? You're always going to work for that 2.5k Paragon if that is your goal. So the cooldown goal, right, for that skill is the number 37. Why would you not work towards that 37 number like 2.5k Paragon did? And then it's not about me saying that, oh, those two words, okay, it's that the opportunity that the monsters saw you, ranged monsters, I might add. Now, I didn't even talk about melee monsters because I assume, right, we know what melee monsters do, right? So when you're moving so much, I really hope it's not the melee monsters, even though this seasonal theme has a higher chance that the melee monsters might be also the problem, right? But that's beside the point. Window of opportunity is as short as it gets, or 1.5-second window. I put both in there, by the way, in the conversation, in that respective conversation. And in fact, it's not just that conversation. I talk about window opportunity all the time whenever like that build comes up, or like, you know, any build with a cooldown thing. So whether it's Wave of Light with your, you know, Epiphany, right? So let's just talk about, you know, Wave of Light, for example, right? Now, where guides writes, you know, where guides writes, you only need like 55% cooldown, right? Or that's the like bare minimum kind of thing. So you got that down. Okay. Now here's the other problem. What is the baseline of the guide? Now, this question is very simple and people tend to overlook it. What does the baseline mean? Well, when you click the interface of the guide, right? the metric of the paragon is normally what? Is it 2.5k? Is it 5k? What is it? Okay? You determine the paragon number that the guide has set. Okay? So, the cooldown. Now, effectively speaking, if you have more damage, then the cooldown can go to the bare minimum. Right? It's like a slider. You slide forward if the monsters take longer. Right? You slide the cooldown further up from the 55. That's only one factor. Okay? The other factor is your paragon. So if you have more paragons, then you slide it back to the 55. If you know that the guide asks you for 55, then you need the paragon number to match the 55. But even then, there's another problem. Okay? The other problem is the Rift Guardian fight. Now, your density might have died, instantly, quote unquote. On especially the seasons that Wave of Light kills super fast, right? So it's not the first 99% that the 55% cooldown has a problem with. So people also misunderstand me when I say about the 55% cooldown thing. They're like, but the guy says 55%. Well, okay. So then we have the Rift Guardian fight then, the duration that it takes. If you take longer and longer and longer at the Rift Guardian for the Wave of Light, your cooldown is going to affect your damage output because you're not instantaneously killing like before. So then you shift the cooldown up because of the Rift Guardian fight. It's that simple. And no, they misunderstand me because the cutoff point is 55. Now, of course, they didn't go exactly 55. They went 61%, let's say, or 60 point something. But naturally, though, it's not even the 61. The number that you actually want is 64 or higher. And the 64 or higher has more factors in there as well. For the LOD Wave of Light, okay, the 64 has other factors. One factor is manually pressed. On the PC, there's the numlock feature. So if you're letting the numlock, play the epiphany for you, okay, it can be before 64%. Like, it can be before anything, really. Because as long as you set it to play the skill for you, you automatically assume that it's played anyway. In the opportunity that, whenever certain monsters hit you. Right? So that's where the window of opportunity comes back. It's like they heard it, but they never absorb it. So the person is taking it too literally, and then they're like negative about it. Hello? It's like it doesn't make any sense. Where the 55% comes from is that it's assumed that you're clearing fast, so then you don't need the cooldown because you killed them on the first rotation. But what about a Rift Guardian? Are you instantly killing a raid boss? The Wave of Light actually takes longer and longer and longer to kill the raid boss at the end when you go up. Now, of course, if your Paragon is over the tier number, then it's marginalized. And now the cooldown slider can shift leftward, meaning lesser cooldown if your Paragon is way higher than the tier number you're doing. Right? So let's say you're playing GR135, but your Paragon number is 4K, then your slider goes nearer to 55%. And I mean, at that point, you don't even need to think about the slider in the first place. You just make sure that on your screen, how many monsters you want on your screen to make that perfect hit to gain a certain amount of progression that values the cooldown that you want. Right? If you want 55% cooldown, then you need more monsters on the screen to make that 55% cooldown work. Because if anything more or outside your window of opportunity to kill, then you need more than 55%. Because you need the cooldown to come back faster for you to do the next rotation of damage. Right? So, in reverse, the God DH or Demon Hunter in general, the Vengeance uptime, okay? The window of opportunity in that 1.5 seconds or less, but I'm just using a rough estimate of 1.5 seconds, is because the 1.5 seconds is determined by whether you manually press or not. So now we have yet another issue, okay? People who, okay, so people who play the PC mechanic of that numlock thing, especially if they do that, okay, not for the ergonomic purposes, they won't understand or they won't hear what window opportunity means. Because why? The skill is already played. What do you mean by window of opportunity? They won't absorb what window of opportunity means. Because why? The window is covered by the PC mechanic. But I didn't even talk about that until now, right? Because that might not be for this respective case. But yet it's another, factor. So there are so many degrees, right, to what the window opportunity is.